2021 was simply a spectacular year for Bionano. Commercially, the results were very strong. We grew the installed base of our Sapphire systems in the world to 164, which represents 69% growth over the installed base on December 31st, 2020, and exceeded our goal of 150 by nearly 10%, with optical genome mapping being adopted at several notable cytogenetics laboratories and academic medical centers in the United States, across Europe, Australia, China, Taiwan, and Japan. We also sold 3,204 flow cells during the fourth quarter of 2021, which represents 29% growth over the same period in 2020, and brings the total for 2021 to 12,500 flow cells sold, and that represents 96% growth over the 6,311 flow cells sold in 2020. Now please remember that the flow cell is the unit consumable in our nanochannel arrays for analyzing one human genome. The more of these flow cells that are purchased in the market indicate more utilization in the field, which in turn leads to more data, more publications, more presentations, and we believe more demand for optical genome mapping. So this is outstanding progress. And our revenues in the fourth quarter of 2021 were $6.3 million, which is up 58% versus the same period in 2020. And revenues for the full year 2021 were $18 million, which represents 111% growth compared to 2020. Now, in clinical development and Bionano laboratories, we also made tremendous progress. The sites conducting our postnatal study published their interim technical performance readout of the study, and the data gave an incredibly positive view of the utility and robustness of optical genome mapping across these sites. The interim results showed that optical genome mapping is consistently performing as well or better than traditional methods used in cytogenetics and for the analysis of chromosomal aberrations and structural variations. The data also showed that optical genome mapping can be performed reliably, reproducibly across multiple sites, multiple sample types, and multiple different operators. Enrollment for our postnatal study reached 113 subjects, while enrollment in the prenatal study received IRB approval and reached 132 subjects. 2022 will be a significant year for progress in these studies, and I'll say more about that when I cover the 2022 strategy and goal. Now, Sapphire sites in Europe reported receiving accreditation for their OGM workflows beginning in Q2 2021. And these accreditations unlock the potential for menu expansion and reimbursement. While in the US during 2021, several sites validated OGM in laboratory developed tests, and they submitted applications for reimbursement codes, including Z codes and proprietary laboratory analysis or PLA codes. These codes are what enable them to get paid for the OGM tests. And in our own Bionano laboratories, during the fourth quarter of 2021, we analyzed 341 samples, and you can compare that to 117 samples that were analyzed in the same quarter in 2020. The total number of samples analyzed in 2021 was 1,067 samples, and that compares to 694 for the year 2020. Now, we believe these services projects can provide critical proof of principle for newcomers to optical genome mapping as they evaluate it in their research with their own samples. The data provide them with the ammunition they need to convince their institutions to bring optical genome mapping in-house. And when we see growth in these services samples being processed, we view it as a good leading indicator of demand for optical genome mapping. In product development, we had tremendous progress as well. We released important assays in the third quarter for optical genome mapping with Sapphire that enabled different applications, including ones for cultured amniocytes and chorionic villi samples, which enable our prenatal studies and customer applications in that area, as well as other applications in prenatal analysis and product of conception. We released version 6.1 of our NX Clinical software in the fourth quarter, which was developed by BioDiscovery. Version 6.1 has expanded capabilities for analysis of next-generation sequencing in genetic disease and cancer, and supports novel assays in these disease areas. And importantly, in the fourth quarter, we completed the prototype of the next version of Optical Genome Mapper that we are working on. This new instrument is expected to enable optical genome mapping analysis at substantially higher throughputs than the Sapphire system currently supports, and should improve many aspects of the optical genome mapping workflow. And financially, we strengthened the balance sheet with equity financings in the first quarter of 2021, which were significant then, but given today's environment, they represent highly important steps in enabling the company's ability to continue growing and achieving these outstanding results. Lastly, I want to mention an important step we took in corporate development, which was the acquisition of BioDiscovery that we completed in October of 2021. And this move brings in their software products for visualization, interpretation, and reporting of sequencing and microarray data, as well as their team of world-class software engineers, including Dr. Sohail Shams, who was their founder and CEO and has become our chief informatics officer. Dr. Sham leads our genome informatics team, including software development and bioinformatics. BioDiscovery gave us the team and the platform into which we could incorporate optical genome mapping quickly. NX Clinical is industry leading for these applications in analyzing structural variation, and it gives us a tool that integrates optical genome mapping alongside these commonly used data types in the industry. What we really conclude is that we exceeded the goals and expectations for all of our planned milestones across the whole year, but we also advanced the company across our strategy, products, and finances in ways that we really feel exceeded our plan overall. In fact, we view 2021 as being a complete transformation of Bionano from a life sciences instrumentation company where we began into a global genomics company that's focused now on elevating the health and wellness of all people with a suite of products and services that have the potential to transform the way the world sees the genome. We see 2022 as representing a key time of inflection for us. We want to elevate the company commercially. We want to improve the product and the services that we provide across the industry. And we want to change the way in which they're accepted. In fact, we call the strategic roadmap for 2022 Elevate. And Elevate has 5 major strategic pillars. First and foremost, we want to continue the amazing progress that we've made in expanding our commercial traction and validation of optical genome mapping. We want to delight our customers with our products. And something that we need to recognize about the level and size of our installed base is that robustness becomes incredibly critical, as well as the use of the products for industrial applications at scale. We want to clear the path for optical genome mapping reimbursement or market access across our target markets on a global basis. We want to continue advancing our products in a way that enables market expansion and penetration into new markets, and we want to make software a strategic driver of Bionano solutions.
The fourth quarter of 2021 was an outstanding quarter for us, which capped off a great year where we achieved impressive year-over-year revenue growth and were able to leverage our strong balance sheet to grow our business through strategic moves like the acquisition of BioDiscovery. I'll begin with a review of our revenues. Revenue in the fourth quarter of 2021 was approximately $6.3 million, slightly above the high end of the preliminary range of $5.8 to $6.2 million that we provided back on January 12th of this year. This is an increase of $1.6 million or 35% over the third quarter of 2021. Revenue for the full year was $18 million, representing a 111% increase over 2020. The fourth quarter includes revenue of $1.1 million from BioDiscovery since the October 2021 acquisition date. Revenue from BioDiscovery is included in the service and other revenue line in our P&L. The year-on-year and quarter-on-quarter increases were driven largely by demand for Saphyr optical genome mapping solutions and, of course, the addition of BioDiscovery. We saw a good balance of growth across all product categories and geographies. Gross margin for the fourth quarter came in at a disappointing 4% compared to 25% in the third quarter of 2021 and 30% from the fourth quarter of 2020. The decrease was primarily due to low manufacturing yields on our chip consumables produced at one of our contract manufacturers and a resulting $1.2 million write-off of inventory in the fourth quarter. Full year 2021 gross margin was 22%, down from 33% in the prior year, largely because of COVID disruptions and personnel turnover at a key supplier. Manufacturing yields of commercial-grade chips fell during 2021. These wafers passed quality control specifications at the foundry, but failed to meet our final commercial quality specifications, and therefore we would not ship to customers. In Q4, continued low yield led to the excess inventory and the write-off of about $1.2 million of inventory. We are actively working with our supplier to get yields back to where they have historically been. This is a transient issue, but it may take a few quarters for gross margin to recover to prior levels. Regarding expenses, this quarter we're updating the way we report our operating expense to include both GAAP and non-GAAP numbers. The acquisition of BioDiscovery resulted in additional stock-based compensation as well as amortization of intangibles expense. These are both non-cash expenses, and we believe that providing our operating expense excluding these ongoing non-cash expenses and as well as certain other one-time expenses will provide a more useful measure of our performance. Fourth quarter 2021 GAAP operating expense was $29 million compared to $12.3 million the prior year. The year-over-year increase was primarily due to headcount-related spending, increased R&D expense, and transaction costs associated with our acquisition of BioDiscovery. Fourth quarter non-GAAP operating expense was $22.1 million, compared with $11.4 million in the fourth quarter of 2020. Non-GAAP operating expense excludes $4.8 million in stock-based compensation, $1.2 million in amortization of intangibles, and $1.2 million in transaction-related costs. Full year 2021 GAAP operating expense was $81 million, and non-GAAP operating expense was $68.4 million. Non-GAAP operating expense for the year excludes $9.7 million in stock-based compensation, $1.4 million in amortization of intangibles, and $1.5 million in transaction costs. At December 31st, 2021, Bionano had cash equivalents, and short-term investments of $250.6 million compared to cash and cash equivalents of $38.4 million at December 31st, 2020. The increase is primarily due to the equity raises that were completed in the first quarter of 2021. As we begin 2022, we're in our strongest position yet. We expect Q1 2022 revenue to be in the range of $5.5 to $5.8 million, representing normal seasonal declines from the prior fourth quarter. We expect full-year revenue to be in the range of $24 million to $27 million, which would be a 33 to 50% growth over the full year 2020. I'm really pleased about what we've achieved and where we're headed.
I want to say that we couldn't really be more excited about the year ahead. We have challenges to address, and the impact of COVID on production quality and supply chain remain concerns. And we are cautious about the macro environment beyond COVID given current global events. Nevertheless, we believe we can make significant progress through Elevate. And here are the key value-driving milestones in 2022. In the first half, we're going to be focused on making progress in our clinical studies, getting IRB approval for our hematologic study, and progressing in other areas of those clinical trials. We are also going to be addressing market access through applications for a CPT code for optical genome mapping. In the second half, we're going to be adding additional laboratory-developed tests to Bionano laboratories. These will be optical genome mapping-based tests. Continue progression in our studies through completion of our postnatal study. We would expect to have an interim publication on our prenatal study. We will also advance the product by releasing new labeling protocols and DNA isolation protocols that will have the effect of simplifying and accelerating, streamlining the OGM workflow. We will have what we're calling a pre-commercial version of this new high-throughput imaging system for optical genome mapping. That's going to be running in the field, so we'll be transitioning from the prototype to this pre-commercial system over the course of the year. And what we expect to achieve in terms of installed base growth is 240 Sapphire systems installed around the world, which is an increase from the 164 systems that we finished 2021 with. But now, in expanding beyond just offering optical genome mapping, we recognize that software plays a critical role in driving forward towards the adoption of Bionano solutions across genomics. And we believe that that's going to be transformational for us. And so we look forward to updating you soon about our progress this quarter, the first quarter of 2022, and of course, throughout the year. And it's important to kind of emphasize the role of these LDTs that we're developing. These are not revenue drivers for us, but they are strategic products that we will use to continue to expand demand for optical genome mapping-based assays. But importantly, we will leverage them to engage with third-party payers such as insurance companies and others to reimburse for optical genome mapping assays. Now, with regard to the pre-commercial rollout, we will start with sites that are designed to implement and evaluate these pre-commercial versions of instruments in a way that gives us useful feedback as we transition to the final development of the actual commercial system for release. And so these tend to be sites that have adequate volume but also are familiar with new technologies and new instruments that haven't yet been released to the market. We try to be cautious and careful about committing to these milestones, and so we have enough confidence to put them out there, and we believe strongly that we'll be able to hit them. The risks that we face, like anybody conducting a clinical trial, tend to be primarily around enrollment, but for us it's a process of data generation, data analysis, reporting, interpretation, and then ultimately the publication. The risk in enrollment is related to COVID and other aspects of staffing shortages and any closures that might happen. We're not seeing closures anymore, and I don't know if other companies are talking about that, but we have seen through the Omicron surge, and maybe that's behind us, but we're still feeling the ripple effects of it, where a lot of staffing shortages have occurred, and as a result, sites are focused on critical activities, essential activities, and so some of these research studies take a back seat, and so that's probably the biggest risk. But staffing shortages also impact our ability to generate and analyze data, so we have to be mindful of those, but it's our job to manage the studies and do the best we can to drive them forward because of the critical role they play